Thank you. Um, Being a part of an intergenerational conversation around periods is really important because obviously the first thing that a lot of children and young people learn about their periods and menstrual health is from their primary caregivers and providers, which is often their parents and guardians. And it's really interesting to see how menstrual health and talking about periods has changed across generations.
I've been running an organisation called Sisters for 11 years now. And it started when I was first diagnosed with an ovarian cyst, learned I had PCOS, then endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, multiple miscarriages, basically all the period problems all rolled into one. And I realised, particularly as a South Asian woman, as a brown woman, our communities didn't really talk about this. And I was never really taught what periods were in my language, in my native Punjabi tongue. And I always just wondered, what does that look like for me? What does that look like for my community around me? For me, growing up, I heard the word bimari, which means being ill. So it was medicalized, you're an illness. And then so that makes you feel a bit weak and that you can't do things. So when you automatically have conditions which do physically weaken you, like endo, for example, you start to think that it's all interlinked, but actually they're very different. And actually it's how we've been colonized as well, and our languages have been taken from us. And now this is an opportunity for us to reclaim that and actually find out what is period in your language.
Well, what drives me to be a period activist is that, I've actually kind of started being involved because of my research, and I got interested in doing research around menstruation because it was 10 years ago. That's really interesting. There's all these books about periods where women are sharing their experiences, but it's not still something we talk about very much. So I was I want to do research on it. And then I noticed this massive wave of period activism in 2015, Kiran Gandhi running the London Marathon, free bleeding, and Rupi Kaur's poetry about periods and images that got taken down from Instagram. And then after that, I thought, wow, periods are so much more visible in the media now. What impact is that having? So there's a project on it, I wrote a book, and as part of that book, I spoke to a lot of kind of young South Asian people across Yorkshire. They all said that they felt like kind of their education in school didn't really include them, and they wanted to see more people like them represented in the media, and they talked about their own specific cultural experiences. And then I got to meet Ricebox a few years ago, and we've continued our collaborations ever since. So this project kind of initially came out of an idea that Ricebox and Nina from Sisters had when attending an event in Sheffield that was run by Akushla Young and I, around some guidance we created about how to communicate about periods on social media effectively, specifically with young people. I think there's kind of two things. The first, and again, this was re-emphasized with the young people I spoke to in my research, is that the menstrual activist movement is quite white, and representations of menstruation in the media rarely include kind of people of colour talking about periods. So kind of more visibility of people from different cultures talking about periods is kind of a big gap, and it'd be great to see more kind of amplification of the voices of women and other people who menstruate from Black and brown groups talking in the media. Again, during my research, I spoke to a lot of young men, and they said that they really wanted to be able to talk more about periods, and they wanted to support the girls at school, their friends, their family, but they really weren't really sure how to do so. And they said that they really didn't feel engaged by the menstrual movement specifically. But what they did enjoy is seeing kind of posts about different subjects where menstruation was mentioned. One spoke about how he's watching a study video and the YouTuber mentioned using a period cup during her exams and how helpful that was, and he remembered that. Another young guy I spoke to remembered that his football club gave out period products. So the young men I spoke to, basically, they were we would really want to learn about periods, and we have learned about it a bit through social media, but we'd really like menstrual activism to engage us more and include us in the conversation rather than kind of just aiming at women or kind of speaking at us in a very politicized way.
The difference between what government policy is saying versus what's actually happening on the ground. Often those things are very different, and unfortunately often policy can be quite idealistic, but what's actually happening on the ground, it doesn't implement in the same way that they think it will on government level. So I'd say that that's probably the most pressing issue, is the lack of sort of working with and for and by communities who experience period poverty and menstrual health disorders and challenges.
So I think it is important to have that conversations, because if it wasn't for the work that we do and these spaces that we have, there'd be no reason for me to have that conversation with my mum. And I think that opens up the conversation around women's health generally, like mum's going through menopause, talking about that. How does it look like for her? How's it been for her? Because I may experience some of those things. And we know as South Asian women, we're more likely to go through menopause earlier anyway. So things like that, I think this conversation about a period might seem so trivial to people, but it opens up the conversation around women's health generally, and that's what's important to me.